welcoming. So welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining. We'll have more people join as we're going along. So this is our second webinar for June. These webinars are, the idea behind these webinars is to raise awareness and to network. So we will do some Q&A with the idea that sometimes people actually contribute content, and this is a really nice way of learning and sharing the work of the global happiness and well-being movement. The genesis for these webinars was at a conference held at the United Nations last April that was convened by the Prime Minister of Bhutan and the Secretary General of the United Nations with the imperative to launch a global happiness and well-being movement. And our work is that grassroots level, really engaging with people and with community activists, policymakers, campuses all over the country to provide them the tools and the resources for that transformation of our economy from money and consumption-based to well-being and happiness-based. We have these webinars once a month. They're at happycounts.org. That's the URL for the Happiness Initiative, which is bringing Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Index to anybody to use at any scale. And you can go to happycounts.org to find out more. You'll see at a tab that says webinars, and you can learn more about those. And so a little bit about the logistics for these webinars, and then I will go in and introduce Linda and Paula. So the logistics for these webinars is we'll have about 30 or 40 minutes of talks by Linda and Paula, and then we'll do some Q&A. If you want to ask a question, there's a couple of ways that you could do it. If you have a headset with microphones, you can raise your hand in your control box, and that way I can unmute you. I'll be facilitating the Q&A. And that's a really nice way to ask a question. If you do not have a headset with a microphone, then I encourage you to ask your question in the question box. And the reason for that is that absent the headset and microphone on this service, it can create a terrible feedback loop that is one of those worse than hands on the chalkboards. Makes us all unhappy. So do raise your hand if you have a headset, and if you don't, just go ahead and put your question in the question box, and I'll put a voice to your questions. So. Paula and Linda work with an organization called GNHUSA, which you can look at gnhusa.org online. They have been crucial in helping the Vermont legislature to adopt the Genuine Progress Indicator, which is an objective measure of happiness and well-being, also adopted by Maryland and now in discussion for Oregon. And in Vermont, because of GNHUSA, they call it the GPI, the Genuine Progress Indicator Plus, where that subjective component is the plus part. So Linda, I met Linda actually at the conference at the United Nations, where we were both part of the civil society working group, and was meeting people like her that really made that whole experience really phenomenal. Linda and Paula set out to do a hero's feat, which, without stealing your thunder, I'll turn it over to you two now. So thank you, Linda and Paula, so much for joining us. Go ahead.
Thank you, Laura. This is Linda speaking.
And this is Paula. Thanks for having us.
We're both in Vermont right now, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about this organization that Laura referred to, Gross National Happiness USA, which was co-founded in 2009 by a small group of Vermonters, and one of our latest initiatives. Laura mentioned one, which is supporting the work of the legislature to pass a bill, the GPI bill, and I have a little bit of information about that toward the end of our presentation. But I think the focus of our talk today is going to be on what Paula and I did recently, which is one initiative of GNHUSA. I think we walked from Vermont to DC last fall, and it was mainly to find out what matters, because we said as an organization we would measure what matters, and we weren't entirely sure that we knew and could state what mattered really truly. So we decided to take a walk. It took us 6 weeks, and then we're going to tell you a little bit more about how that happened and what we found out. We'll also tell you a little bit about the bill. I mentioned that toward the end. Paula, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's great. Good plan.
All right, so I am going to start moving through the slides, and Paula and I are going to try very hard not to interrupt each other too much. Okay? All right, so our theme on this walk was serious about happiness. We had t-shirts that said this, which drew some good attention. Uh-oh. So here's a nice introductory slide that shows the photos that were taken when we arrived about a week into our walk in Brattleboro, Vermont. So as I mentioned, we co-founded GNHUSA back in 2009, and this happened because I was blessed to participate in the 4th research conference for GNH, which was held in Thimphu, the capital of Bhutan, back in 2008. I was also blessed to get trapped there for an additional week because there was the political uprising in Bangkok, which shut down the airport. So I got to stay with one of my mentors, Dasho Karma Ora, who is the director of the Center for Bhutan Studies in Thimphu, which is the center that is collecting data on their set of indicators called gross national happiness. I was super moved by that experience. There were 66 international attendees at this conference in 2008, and 6 of them were from Vermont, which was pretty astonishing. And I just sensed some similarities between our state here in the east, northeast, and with that country. The population is quite similar. The geography is somewhat similar. The values felt very similar. So I came home hungry to do something with my new affiliation to this concept. And I started talking to people, and it was not a problem to gather many people together to talk about GNH. We held a bunch of opinion leader meetings in Vermont. And their proposal was to start a new nonprofit organization, which we did in the next year. And some of the initial participants in this organization got active right away in organizing the first GNH conference in the country. We held that in Burlington in 2010. A group of us attended the 5th GNH conference down in Brazil. We started doing presentations around Vermont. We launched a Pursuit of Happiness walk at various events like July 4th, Independence Day, and also now April 13th, which is Pursuit of Happiness Day in Vermont. And as you know, much of what we're trying to do has been nicely stated by academics and philosophers for eons. Joseph Stiglitz said nicely here, we've known for years that human economic activity exhausts our natural resources and damages our fragile environment. Yet economists and governments, I can't quite see the whole screen. I'll let you finish reading it. I'm going to make an assumption, too, that you have all listened to Robert Kennedy's beautiful and eloquent speech on GNP and its inadequacies. If you haven't, I highly recommend that you Google it. This is now 50 years old. And as you're probably aware, around the world, countries and governments and institutions are getting on board with this idea that we're measuring the wrong things and that development is unheeded. Growth development is not necessarily serving our well-being. So I hinted earlier on why walk. I can let Paula explain why she wanted to do it, but about a year ago, a little longer than a year ago, I think Paula and I both realized at a series of board meetings that we really needed to find out what mattered. And we both love to walk, and I think we were looking for a reason to walk. It sort of appeared, and we started planning. Paula, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I would say that the both of us were feeling a sense of urgency to do something, and we were a little bit stuck with where we could have an impact, but we knew that one thing that we could do was walk and talk to people. So with each of us having the strong pull to do a long walk, we combined that passion with this need to talk about what we wanted to know, which is what matters to people. So we set out planning for this long walk, and there it is right there. We went from Vermont to DC, and we basically talked about how long we could walk each day and looked for people that might be able to put us up, feed us, allow us to take a shower, and mapped out this 6.5 week journey.
We arrived in DC on October 7th. We left Vermont on August 25th, Paula's birthday. And here is kind of a summary of why we were doing it. We believe everyone has this right to pursue happiness, and we assume that it involves so much more than what is reflected and encouraged by the current measures that we're using to measure success and progress in our culture and our economy. And we really wanted to know what matters. We thought that knowing that, having that documented, could inform the work that everybody else is now doing around developing new sets of indicators. We made some assumptions about what we'd heard while keeping open. It's hard not to have some assumptions. Luckily, a bunch of them held true, but there was so much more. And here we're going to tell you a bit about what we heard. So as we traveled, we carried an audio recorder, and we talked to probably 350 people along the way, asking them these questions. We would meet them in somewhat formal settings like this, where a couple places organized events for us, but we often met them just on the street, in a cafe, in a country store in the morning when we were starting our walk. Our hosts, we stayed with host families every night. We would interview them and their families as well. So we gathered a lot of data around what happiness means to people and what matters most. And so here's what we heard. Number one, first off, we heard that family is happiness and is what matters most.
We have about 20 hours of these recordings of people talking about what matters most. It's really phenomenal to listen to them. At some point, we're going to transcribe all of that information and share it in some kind of audio format.
It was an incredibly wonderful journey and experience to engage people in a conversation that would light up their eyes. Once they knew that we weren't going to be asking for money or selling them anything or encouraging them to join some religion, they were very present. And we found ourselves sometimes arriving at a country store in the morning ready to go and not getting out the door for another 2.5 hours because of the conversations.
It was really amazing. We had these neon t-shirts that had sayings of happiness on them. So for the most part, people were engaging us in conversation, wanting to know what we were doing, which was an easy way to open the door. You can see those t-shirts right there, some of them. So it was an easy way to get in a conversation going. And people were just pretty amazed, I think, that we were doing this walk. So we started off on a really great foot, but it was unbelievable how easily people slipped into conversations that were pretty deep and they shared some very personal, intimate information with us in a very short period of time. So relationships in general, family first, relationships in general, are certainly what people said mattered most.
We heard that the most, that's for sure. And in this one instance in Fairfield, Connecticut, this couple was a delight to spend time with. In retirement now, had decided to get rid of most of their things and focus on their family and their relationships.
This particular couple had spent a good part of their adult years acquiring material goods, and recently their focus had shifted to relationships, to what had deep conversations about what mattered. And then, of course, nature came up often, and here's some examples of nature that we bumped into. We were in Vermont. We saw a lot of what you see, Linda, in there with the dirt roads and a lot of space and nature around us with the beautiful flowers and the farms. As we went further south, we saw less and less of that, but we did try to work it into our walk along the way whenever we could. That tree on the right there is a tree that's actually in Princeton University. It's a sequoia tree, I believe.
Yeah, we heard the relationship to their environment was contributed to happiness, and as Paula said, I believe, we haven't transcribed everything yet, but I believe we did hear that mostly in Vermont. And as we went south, it came up less and less. And I think this is anecdotal, but as we left Vermont too, we lost ourselves during our walk, lost touch with nature a little bit too, because the roads were paved and the cars were going faster and the people weren't necessarily looking you in the eye, and there were more shopping malls, and there was just less of nature in general. And then all of a sudden we'd come across these beautiful stretches of Maryland and Pennsylvania that were still beautifully natural, and they would bring our sense of peace and back again. We heard from Christine. This is actually Paula's sister, I believe, who made our t-shirts.
That's right.
A lovely quote of nature. It's the only real truth there is.
I'd say that we met a real diverse group of people along the way. Now, we were mostly in the eastern, well, we were on the eastern part of the country, northeast. But I'd say within the context of that, we met a diverse group of people who, and this was one of the surprises for me, is that even within that diversity, we were hearing basically the same things.
This is another thing we thought a lot about and we heard quite often from people. And I'm going to say, especially in Vermont, community vitality. Although, yeah, 2 of these shots are from Vermont. The other one, the 3 women, that's from Western Massachusetts. We often heard about the value of connections with neighbors and the vitality of their community. And just a brief story, the picture on the left is in I think it's the Barnard Country Store in Vermont. Paula and I tried to start and stop at country stores each day, thinking that we'd be able to get a good snack to go in the morning. I would say and we occasionally scheduled stops in towns to have lunch at country stores, but I would say that more than half of the ones we expected to visit were closed. And it was really sad to see that this central community hotspot where people connect with each other, where people share information, where people keep up to date on each other, these places are going down because of economic competition outside of the community itself. We had incredible conversations with these people though too, and they're definitely committed to community and community vitality themselves. But we were sure we would have long conversations about. We were sure there were ways to keep these vital hubs, these country stores, up and going in Vermont, and how essential they were beyond just providing goods and economic as an economic driver in the community. They provided so much more.
So we were giving this talk just a week or two ago, and we were telling the story about this particular country store. When we got there, it was closed, but there were a group of people inside sitting at their computers trying to organize around opening the store and keeping it sustainable. And when we were talking about the country store, one of the people in the audience mentioned the fact that the store is now open. So they were really successful.
Yeah.
And so it shows what, you can do as a community.
Yeah. And Neil here is a good example of the critical hub that the community center serves. He is one of the old Vermont farmers. He's been there since birth, farming, raising cows. And in Vermont, I'm not sure about where you are, but in Vermont, we have a lot of new generation, very younger 20-somethings coming into Vermont to farm. And they're wonderful, and they're committed to the earth and growing things and to their communities. And there's a pretty big gap. And I don't know if it's a values gap or not, but there's a gap between the older farmers and the new Vermonters. And Neil was saying how he has found himself playing the role of the mediator, the bridge, to bring these two generations together. And a lot of that happens right here at the community center, the country store. This is something that he said, which says so clearly his commitment to this place and his neighbors, new and old. We heard about meaningful work. We heard about meaning in general, finding meaning and purpose in life. Just a quote about how work can contribute to happiness in the spirit and the economy. We heard this a lot and in many different ways. And I just mentioned purpose and meaning, but we heard often a feeling of belonging, a sense of connection. And we would start each of our days with this, grounding ourselves in this sense of connection with the earth and with what was to come that day and what had happened the day before. A related topic, interdependence. These were words. I think when we end up assessing our data or analyzing our data, we'll be finding themes within them. Interdependence, nicely said here by Kathy, who hosted us on our first night out. As you can see, we heard it in many different ways from many people. And this one, although we, again, haven't analyze the data. This one, I think we heard close to second place, next to friends and relationships and family, doing for others, giving to others, serving, making others happy.
That's certainly something that we experienced along the way. Oftentimes, we would have plans to walk to a certain place, but not have a host lined up or a meal lined up. And we found that whenever we expressed our needs were met. We were on the receiving end of people's generosity very frequently.
Well, here's an example, nicely placed here. Bob Thompson, up here on the left, was sitting at the bar in this inn on our 5th night out, and we were hurting. We didn't really realize that we were doing an extreme sport until about this night. Paula's feet were just covered with blisters, and my whole body was aching. And we got to Saxton's River Inn not knowing where we were going to stay, but knowing there was an inn, which was nice. It was the first night that we didn't have a planned host. Paula hobbled by the bar, and Bob asked what was wrong. And she told him that her feet were hurting and blistered, and she explained what she was doing around the walk, and he immediately engaged her as he had walked for cancer numerous times. He jumped off his seat and ran into the nearest town, which was 10 miles away, and came back with a lifetime supply of moleskin and Band-Aids for Paula. And when he handed her the bag, we were sitting down having dinner in the inn. He handed her the key to room 313. He was the innkeeper, and he knew we didn't have a place to stay, and he gave us one. We ran into situations like this quite often. We were celebrating our 200th mile in an Indian restaurant in Western Mass, and when the owner of the restaurant heard that, he donated the meal. So yes, we heard this from many people. Laughter, fun, enjoying life. And we also heard these things and more. Health, education. We heard music numerous times. We heard pets, which is probably unconditional love, but in a different form. Faith might be related to the connection, the belonging, the interdependence. And freedom. We heard freedom and opportunity, liberty. And we heard that happiness was a choice. A number of people said that. Oh, but true happiness we did discover. It's having sidewalks. I can't tell you, there were a few days on this journey when we would be on little winding roads without shoulders for miles and miles, with cars tearing around corners and us jumping into the poison ivy on the side of the road. And then us screaming around the corner to get to another open view where we could see who was coming. And then at the end of, this is the end of one of those days where we finally came across a sidewalk. Very happy to see it. Okay, enough jokes. Let's get back. So we made it to DC, 594 miles. Great cause for celebration, and we've had months to reflect on this now. The transcribing is going well. We have plans for this material. As I transcribe, I'm just reminded of the wisdom of the people on the street. A lot of the work of this movement right now of switching indicators is being done in higher education, and at the policy level. But if you go out and ask people about happiness, you will discover, I mean, you know this. Ask yourself, ask your family.
And this is what we encourage people to do along the way too. We would engage them in conversation, but we'd also encourage them to take the conversation forward and have it with their family, with their neighbors, with their community. I think the conversations were really important for the receiver. I got that sense that it was a conversation that they've been waiting to have and wanting to have, and may not have had the opportunity to speak to with others. In fact, there were some people who said, I've really never thought about what really matters most. Linda, are you there?
Oh, looks like Linda went offline. Maybe she's having some interruption. So if you want to, Paula, if you want to continue with the presentation, do you have the PowerPoint?
I can talk, but I can't show you the slides when she comes back on.
Do you have the slides yourself?
I will do that. Yep.
Okay. So, what I can do is I can make you, sorry, I apologize to people who are online. What I'll do is I'll make you the presenter. So you're going to, in a moment, you'll, whoops.
Like we just explained.
Okay. Oh, Linda's back, it looks like.
Did I lose somebody?
I think it's Linda.
Yeah, we were offline for a little while, so I think, okay, there we go.
There you go.
Are we good?
Yeah. Yeah. So
we're influencing the design of a new economy.
Linda, let's go back a ways, because you actually were offline for everybody else except I think yourself for a little while. So if we could go back.
Oh, because of the storm, maybe.
Yeah, if we could go back a couple of slides, that'd be great. Yeah,
Tell
go back.
When, Laura.
Go back again. And a little bit more.
Oh, no, really?
And a little bit more.
Right there.
There.
We gave away the
Okay,
secret.
there we
True
go.
happiness.
Yeah, you were just right
Lost
there.
you at true happiness?
No, you told us the secret to true happiness.
We did?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
good.
so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead to have.
Okay. All right, so we just have a few slides left, and they're pretty much about their summary. We made it our 594 miles, and we celebrated at the Jefferson Memorial. It was one of the only rainy days. We had about 3 rainy days out of 44. All right, so what will we do? What do we do with this information? Well, the goal is to increase happiness. We know that happy people treat each other better. We know that they're more generous, more charitable. We know that their families are healthier, their marriages are stronger. We know that they act with greater integrity, and we know that they serve their communities and their governments and their organizations well and better than unhappy people. Then Arthur Brooks of the Conservative American Enterprise Institute says we have the right to pursue happiness, but we also have an ethical responsibility to exercise that right. And we hope that the information that we're gathering and the work that we're doing with GNHUSA will inform this discussion around happiness and how we pursue it, and grounding it again in what really matters to people. We believe we need a fundamentally different bottom line, that our new economy will use measures of what truly matters. We imagine a number of shifts from a growth economy to a humanitarian economy, from separateness to connectedness, from complacency to courage, from scarcity to abundance, from the status quo to creative change. And some of the things that GNHUSA is doing currently. We're still a fairly small volunteer-run organization, but we're involved in a number of local, national, and international efforts, educating people around indicators and how those indicators drive behavior. It's a major message. We're also gathering stories, as we just shared. We're influencing the design of a new economy. There's a group in Vermont, Paula can tell you a little bit more about it, that is a collaboration for a new economy in Vermont, very active and strong. We're supporting policy making processes that focus on what people say matters most, the GPI plus, for example. We're inspiring people to create their own happiness, to see that it's a choice, and that that the pursuit of happiness is yours to design. We hold events, fun and enlightening events, in our capital city of Montpelier and elsewhere. And a big goal of GNHUSA is to connect people and initiatives to each other, because we feel like there's a lot of energy going on around this shift, and we really need to learn who each other is, just like Laura is doing here with these webinars. Specifically in Vermont, there's some pretty significant headway and awareness here at all levels. There is a Vermont Data Collaborative where nonprofits and public sector state organizations are sharing data, and we're offering and receiving results-based accountability training, which is a new, well, it's not that new, pretty effective and powerful tool for tracking social impacts. We passed the first state to actually legislate a bill. Act 113 here passed two Mays ago, last summer. It's the Genuine Progress Indicator Bill, which basically says that once the Gund Institute at UVM comes up with a GPI set of indicators that is accepted by the legislature, our government will use it for policy making. So right now where it stands is that the Gund Institute is developing that set, and it's due to come out fairly shortly. For 2 years now, we've celebrated April 13th, which is Jefferson's birthday. Paula and I host a long walk that day. And this year we actually had a 3-day event full of fun and educational activities in Montpelier. We are planning to get engaged and involved in the International Day of Happiness activities. And Paula and I will continue our walk. Let's connect borders. And that's it. Anything you want to add, Paula?
I think that going back to the new economy conversation, it's really about looking at what the leverage points are. The GNHUSA has talked about Vermont as being like a learning community. And we're looking at what the leverage points are, which tend to be around the environmental issues and food sustainability and local bank initiatives, so that we're helping people come together to see where the commonalities are and the common goals are around what matters. And this is where GNH measures come in. So that's been an exciting outcome of the work of GNHUSA and partnering organizations.
So we'd love to take some questions, comments.
Yeah, so this is where we have the question and answer period. So you can put your questions into the question box there, or you can raise your hand if you have a headset and microphones, and I'll unmute you so you can ask your questions. If you might have something that you want to add. Last month or the month before, when John DeGraff was giving a talk, we had some really good contributions from a woman who had joined from England about what's happening in the UK with their gross national happiness, or their happiness use there. So if you have something you'd like to add, please do so now, as well as questions and comments. I want to add, before you all please do ask your questions and comments, or it'll end up being me asking the questions. But I want to add that we do record these, and we put these online and in a base camp, which is sort of a combination of a Google share documents and Facebook that anybody can have access to. So you will have access to Basecamp. You'll need to email me, and I'll give you that access. And then you can actually even give other people access once you're online. So I'm going to put my email there. If you want to have the recording of this, which you can then are encouraged to use in any way that you see, and you can also look at the other recordings and hear the other recordings of other talks. So, do we have any questions?
Well,
yeah.
And Laura, you just reminded me too that while we were walking, we were blogging, and that information, some of our blogs are still up at our website. We have a separate website. It's happinesswalk.com.
Beautiful. Great. So I have a question, more on a personal level, to both of you individually. How did the walk change your life? Did you find any fundamental changes in your perspective or your life because of the walk?
I can respond to that. This is Linda. I tend to get a little discouraged by the media, by our government, by things that I see happening around me. This walk transformed that. I am incredibly reassured that American people are wonderful and decent and good, and that our media and our government don't necessarily speak for us right now, but we do know. We do know. So I would say yes, for me, in terms of changing my life, I have a lot more confidence that this can be done. But I also think that it has to be done from the bottom up.
You're talking about the economic transformation of our economic system? Okay.
Yes.
Beautiful.
And this is Paula, and I would say for me, it was absolutely transforming in that I felt incredibly alive on this walk. And I think the reason for that was just having very few if any, expectations, and allowing things to just evolve and to present themselves, to meet people and just be a listener. And I found that the conversations were unbelievably rich. I felt incredibly centered. I was so inspired by the generosity of people and how things unfolded in a way where we always had our needs met. That to me was amazing. So just the idea of walking through life, knowing that if you're open to it, that you, there's pets being one of the important things in people's life.
I'm gonna go ahead and.
But if you're open to it, then
I'm just gonna mute Linda
life
real quick,
really does work in your favor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm certain that I'll never stop walking now.
Yeah, that was the other question. Is it has there been something that you've carried into your daily life because of this? So do you walk more, or spend more time in mindfulness, or is there something that you've practiced into your daily life now?
Well, mindfulness is something that I definitely try to live. But we're also planning a walk to go from, we started in Stowe, Vermont, and headed south. And we're planning a walk later in the summer or early fall to start from Stowe, Vermont, and head north and perhaps go to Montreal, Canada. So Linda and I think we'll keep planning walks until we can't walk anymore. What do you think, Linda?
No, for sure. I know, for sure. And I can also add to that, or to Laura's question. The pace of walking is pretty special and allows, I felt like it just allowed us much more time for reflection and to be connected to our environment, whether it was Route 1 or a dirt road of Vermont. There just felt like a deeper connection, more time, and just to see the beauty in everything, to see the beauty in the weeds along the side of the road and the natural beauty of the sides of the road, but also you would have time to actually reflect on the loss of beauty in the places where GDP is driving activity. We had an awful lot of time to reflect, and I think maybe, yes, in response to your question, Laura, I think I am slowing down because that was so valuable, and we did it for such an extended long period of time that was long enough to get us, for me, to change some behavior.
Beautiful. So Michael,
and I would,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that even the observations of being in places where like our environment is challenged and whatnot, it did cultivate in me a sense of gratitude for what we do have. So you can take those moments and you can turn it into something positive. And I think that the more that we show gratitude, the more open we are to the small miracles that happen in life every day.
Beautiful. So Michael from DC states, just want to say thanks for taking this action to raise visibility of happiness as a tangible, measurable social goal, not just an aspiration. Cheers. And we do have a question, but I wanted to add to that I wonder if you are already thinking about or encouraging others to do similar walks, and maybe even putting together a sort of tips for walks. And I would love to see that. And if you were to do that, we have toolkits for conducting happiness initiatives. Would love to share something like that with those that we're working with, as it seems like this is something that anybody could do. So Arthur, I'm going to unmute you. And okay, Arthur, go ahead with your question.
Hi there. Yes, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what you learned from the walk that applies to policy, to trying to bring happiness indicators, GNH, that sort of thing, to other jurisdictions, states, cities. or whether you think that this is just more general movement building.
Thank you for that question, Arthur, right?
Yes.
What we learned from the walk that could inform policy. That's what you're asking.
I'm just going to unmute you again, Arthur. And I think he was talking about the action, locus-based action too, right, Arthur?
Yes. So I'm also interested in, did you get a sense that there were certain areas that were really ready to do something, maybe just at a city level around happiness?
Oh yeah.
That's a tangent, but part of the same question. Sure.
Right, that's good. The only thing that comes to mind, maybe Paula will think of more. When we were heading down towards New York, I had a few calls from journalists wanting to know what we were up to, and there were suggestions that, we bring our GPI as an example, and hold an event in DC and get people rallying around doing that in New York. But I think Paula and I decided early on that this wasn't necessarily going to be about that affecting that kind of energy. Like, this was a personal journey, and it was also a gathering data journey. It wasn't necessarily that sorry if I'm not finding the right words. Maybe Paula, you can help me. But I think we decided early on not to spend our time organizing events or rallies, or we did meet with a number of policymakers and academics along the way. We stopped at Brookings Institute and met with Carol Graham, and we stopped and met with our legislators in DC. Peter Singer at Princeton we had dinner with. So we kind of explored it, but we were on a data mining mission. I didn't get a sense, nor was I really paying attention to where specific places that were ready, but I would say that just about everybody we talked to was ready.
Yes, and I would add to that too that there are, we did some research before we walked too, and there are certain cities and towns that I think have a greater sense of readiness for this sort of measuring what matters than others, and there are some mayors that really are promoting that sort of thing, and a lot of that, one like we talked about earlier, one of the tipping points is environmental issues and local food issues. So that's a good starting point for getting conversations going about how to build in more of what matters and measures that will speak to those issues for people.
If that's okay if I chime in, I'll just really quickly, Arthur. So at the Happiness Initiative, we're bringing essentially Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Index to anybody. So we've been working with cities, campuses, community activist groups, businesses to using that measure of happiness. And we have a toolkit online, but what I'd say that's really important is it kind of goes back to what's important in life of what Linda and Nancy found was that it's relationships, and that we found that when there is a really strong core group of people who really enjoy working together and want to continue to working together, and we'll see this as a marathon, not as a sprint. That's where we see the most effective work. For example, at Eastern Washington University, we've been doing this work for 3 years. They've been using our gross national happiness indicator for 2 years, and they see the work that they're doing, both the sort of flashy stuff where the media gets attracted, and the long-term work where you're coming up against some of the resistance that you come up against when you're talking about societal and economic change. They see it as all part and parcel. So sorry to intervene there, Linda.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Laura.
Paula.
I also wanted to add one of the other real ahas that Paula and I had along the way was how often people said to us that they appreciated just having the conversation. I think that was a surprise to me, that people don't talk about what matters to them there very often, which goes to what Arthur was talking about with the movement part. I feel drawn to that, to encouraging people to really take the time to reflect and think and talk with their families and friends and about this most serious topic, because once that reaches a certain amount of a level of interest, it'll be a lot easier to change
Yeah.
at the policy level.
And and also, I mean, both GNHUSA and Happiness Initiative, we've been working at sort of the policy level. But the one big, huge takeaway from all of this is, and then I think the Bhutan really has it right on, is that connection to the individual, to the heart, and to that conversation that's ongoing, just like life is. So, Arthur, I'm going to unmute you because we maybe over answered your question, or maybe didn't answer it at all. So, Arthur, if you could, anything else? Did you get your question answered, Arthur?
I think I got good answers. I'm not sure they spoke directly to my question about, is there a very neat package that we can take home from this to make our next marathon, if you will, more effective at another state. But I'm not sure if there is one, or that's the most important question. So thank you either way.
Thank you, Arthur.
Thank
Nice,
you.
neat package. That's a nice idea.
I'll say this field is much too emergent for other. We're all experimenting, including Bhutan, who's been doing this now for eight and a half years. So, but I'm sure Linda and Paula, what's happening with the GPI and the other work in Vermont. So do you feel the same way, or?
Right, and I think we're still at the place where we are looking at the data that we've collected too. And we're not going to stop collecting this data. It's going to be dynamic. So when we're looking at what GPI Plus looks like, we're infusing what we're learning into that conversation. We want to infuse what we've learned into other conversations that relate to GNH across Vermont and in our other partner conversations as well. But we still have some work to do to kind of tease out what that data says.
And there are plans to do that. And as Laura asked earlier, we have also toyed with the idea of coming up with a way to support other people who want to do this kind of work, walking and talking and listening. It's very it makes you happy.
And we did learn a lot about how to do a walk. We learned by doing. And those are some things that we could definitely share and probably have shared somewhat on our happinesswalk.com website. But there are also people that do long walks in the States all the time. And I know that there's a group of people that are looking to convene a actual convention around that. So if I hear word about when that's happening, if it's happening, I'll post that on the happinesswalk.com site.
Beautiful. So I think we have time for one more question. In the meantime, I just want to reiterate that we will post this. We're recording this, and we will post it online on our base camp. And anybody who wants access to that, just shoot me an email, and we'll give you access to this recording of this webinar, as well as all of the others that we've done over the last year. Our next webinar is going to be part 2 of a series on mindfulness. So it's that positive psychology piece. And that will be July 1st at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. You can download part 1, which includes a manual or workbook, I should say, on mindfulness. Real simple approach, non-threatening approach, certainly not religious at all, up on Basecamp. So I'd be happy to give people access to that. So if we have another question, this would be a great time for another question or a comment, or let's see if anybody else would like to say something. But in the meantime, thank you to everybody who's joined. And you can find out more about the future webinars at happycounts.org, where you can also take the Gross National Happiness Index, which is based on Bhutan's Gross National Happiness It's a scientifically, internally and externally validated survey that gives you your own subjective measure of well-being, or how you assess yourself to be along what Bhutan has named the domains of happiness, or the conditions of happiness. And you can also get a unique code and use that for any group. So we have cities, libraries, businesses, campuses, and even families using it for their well-being. Our board of directors is using it to gauge our own well-being. So,
Thank
Paula,
you, Laura.
yeah, Paula and Linda, did you have anything else to add? Or thank you really so much for doing this.
No, it was great to get a chance to share with you all.
Great, thank you so much, and I'd love to follow up with you about providing other people more about how to walk and keep up the great walking.
Well, thank you. And anybody's welcome to join us whenever we plan our next walk, or maybe you can let us know when if you plan a walk, and we can come and join you.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, I'm going to unmute everybody to be able to say goodbye. There's not too many left now, so we can all say goodbye. So goodbye and thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Bye. Thank you, Laura, for setting
this
up.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.